Well, thanks for the introduction, Catherine. In addition to writing Photoshop CS4 and CS5, the missing manuals, I'm also the chief evangelist of Istockphoto. So I've got the wonderful Istockphoto logo right here, the world's most popular resource for royalty-free images, video, and vectors, which you're going to be using a lot of in the session today. And in fact, Marcy has got a link for all of y'all to get 5 free images from Istockphoto, plus a 20% discount on your first purchase of 50 or more credits. And the URL for that is istockphoto.com/CS5 missing manual. And I believe Marcy's going to put that in the chat room for y'all. Also, this is a very short edition of my larger combining photos and vectors class that I'm developing for kelbytraining.com right now. So if you can't get enough of combining vectors and photos today, in a couple of months my new DVD will be out, and you can find that over at tinyurl.com/Lesa videos. And, of course, I've also got a title on lynda.com. And the other bribe that I've got for my audience today is a free copy of Design Tools Monthly, the executive summary of graphic design news. And you can get that by going to my own website, www.graphicreporter.com, and you'll see a link on the right-hand sidebar that lets you click through to get your free issue of that great little newsletter. So now let's get started. So I want to get you excited by showing you a few of the fun things that we're going to be creating in Photoshop by using vectors. So this guy right here, this is obviously not the background that he started out on, but I'm going to show you how to swap it out in just a quick flick of a blend mode. And as you can see from all these examples, vectors really allow you to embellish your photos in fun and creative ways. And we're also going to look at how to create resizable and featherable masks using Photoshop's shape tools. So to get started, I want to go ahead and show you the difference. Let me close these for you. I want to show you the difference between vectors and raster or regular photographic images. As you may know, all images are made up of tiny individual pixels, which if you zoom in far enough, and I'm going to press Command plus, Control plus on a PC repeatedly to zoom in, and as I zoom in, you can actually see the individual pixels that this photo was comprised of. Okay, let me zoom back out, Command minus or Control minus on a PC. Now, vectors are a completely different animal because they're not made up of pixels at all. They're actually comprised of points that have paths in between, and you can see those guys here. That's all the little blue lines. That's what creates a vector image, and they're created in programs like Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW, things like that, freehand, if any of you are old freehand users. So the great thing about vectors is that since they're not made of pixels, you don't ever have to worry about making them really, really large. Your quality will never go down the tubes. You'll never get pixelation or anything like that because there's no pixels involved. So that's one of the beauties of using vectors. Now in Photoshop, I believe as of version CS2, when we're bequeathed to Smart Objects by Adobe, Photoshop can actually recognize a vector file when you import it as a smart object, and it remembers what kind of file it is. So it's a great way to experiment with the size of the vector in your file because you can make it big, you can make it small, you can make it big, you can make it small as many times as you want, and you'll never, ever, ever lose quality. So that's going to be the bulk of our discussion today. So let me go ahead and close this. Incidentally, I'm going to use a slew of keyboard shortcuts, and I will try to load you up with all those. I'm pressing Command W or Control W on a PC to close my window, and then I'm pressing the first letter in each button to activate that button because, you know, I don't want to mouse all the way over there. So I'm going to press Don't Save, and I'm going to pop over to Bridge, and we're going to open up our first little embellish project we're going to do. So I'm going to open up this sexy girl, and I'm going to turn off the Smart Object layer that I've already created so you can see the original. So that's the original image that we started out with. But just by adding a unique vector that I snatched from over at Istockphoto, these music notes here, I can experiment with their size, and it really adds a unique edge to the photo. It makes it eye-catching, and if any of us are creating any kind of unsolicited, direct mail kind of things, we have about 0.03 seconds to catch your target audience's attention. So this is a great way to really do that, an unusual image, something unexpected coming out of the saxophone. So let me show you how I created it. Over here in my Layers panel on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm going to go ahead and press the Delete key to get rid of this Smart Object so I can show you how I placed it. And pressing the Delete key to delete layers is my favorite feature in Photoshop CS4. I could not believe it took Adobe 11 versions to give us the delete key. So to import the vector as a smart object so that Photoshop knows that it is a vector, makes it resizable, we're going to choose File, and then we're going to go down to the Place command, and that's going to allow us to import the vector into an already open document. Of course, if you want to begin with the smart object, for example, if you want to open the vector first, you don't already have a Photoshop document open, then you can choose Open as Smart Object. But since we want to import that vector musical notes into this photo that's already open, we want to place it. So let's go ahead and choose File, Place. And you're going to navigate to where that vector lives. And you want to navigate to the EPS or the AI, the Adobe Illustrator file. Either one will work just fine. So my EPS lives right here. So I'm going to give it a click and then click Place, the bottom right of the Place dialog. And immediately, Photoshop is going to bring it into your document and puts resizing handles around it, or rather the bounding box. And this is so you can rotate it, which we need to do, or resize it. And Photoshop's, pretty smart that way. It figures that you're going to need to do a little bit of resizing. So while I've got this bounding box active, I'm going to go ahead and hold down my Shift key, and I'm going to rotate it by just dragging my cursor just a hair below one of the bottom corner handles, and then I'm going to release that key. It's still a little too big, so I'm going to click and hold Shift Option on a Mac or Shift Alt on a PC, and that's going to allow me to resize all four corners at the same time instead of having to grab each corner and resize it individually. Then I'm going to release those modifier keys, click within the bounding box to move the vector over to where I actually want it, get it placed. And this is a great example of the power of using vectors because I've made the darn thing too small. I want it to be bigger. So I can go ahead, and while I've still got that transform box up, or bounding box rather, I can make it larger. And even if I had pressed return to accept the transform or accept the resize, I could still summon free transform by pressing Command T or Control T on a PC, and I would still be able to resize it as many times as I want because Photoshop knows it's a vector. So now that I have it the right size, I'm going to go ahead and press Return or Enter on a PC. Now the last thing I need to do is I need to hide parts of the illustration that I downloaded from iStock because I don't need that part in my image. It's going to cover up that little girl's cute little face. So all we have to do is add a layer mask. And you can add a layer mask by clicking the little circle within a square icon at the very bottom of your Layers panel. And you can't see it because I've got these darn little chat thingies. There they go. So it's the circle within a square at the bottom of the Layers panel. We'll add a layer mask to your smart object. And as you may well know, in the realm of the layer mask, painting with black conceals or hides. Painting with white reveals. So my layer mask is empty right now. It's white, so nothing has changed on my image. But to hide parts of what's going on that layer, all I need to do is paint with a regular old black brush. So I'm going to press B to grab the regular old brush tool, take a peek at the color chips at the bottom of your Layers panel, and make sure that the foreground color, that's this one right here, the chip on top, is set to black. And then mouse over to your image, and you've got your familiar round brush cursor, and you can use the right bracket key to go up in brush size or the left bracket key to go down in brush size, and you can just paint over the vector illustration that you don't want to include in your image. And that's literally all there is to it. So here's our before, and there's our after. So it's a great way to spice up your image. I'm going to go ahead and close this document, and we'll open another one. So I'm pressing Command or Control W and D. Don't save. Hop back over to Bridge, and I'll show you another example. This is a real fun one. Can you believe, did you know that grown men actually race these little motorcycles? They're called pocket bikes, and they are funny. They're almost as funny as the Texas lawnmower races. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the Smart Object layer I brought in earlier so you can see how it's done once more. So I'm going to press the Delete key to get rid of that layer. That's in CS4 and CS5. And we're going to go back up to the File menu because we want to bring the Smart Object, or the vector rather, into an already open document. So we need to choose File, Place, navigate to where the EPS or the AI file lives, and this time this one lives right here. So it's the actual Illustrator file. That's another thing I love about downloading vectors from iStock is you get the actual Illustrator file. So if you need to change the color or delete certain aspects of the illustration, you can do that. Now in this situation, the vector came in honking big, and I need to resize it. But arguably, it's hard to resize it if I can't see the resizing handles. So a quick little tip for you, if this happens, and of course it will, is to press Command-0 or Control-0 on a PC, and Photoshop will resize your window just enough that you can actually see all those corner handles. So again, I'm going to press and hold Shift plus Option or Shift plus Alt on a PC, and that's going to resize proportionately all four corners at the same time. So I'm just going to drag diagonally inward until I get my burst of flame about the right size, and keep making it big or small. And again, since it's a vector, you don't ever have to worry about quality loss. You can experiment with it small, make it bigger, make it smaller, whatever you would like. So I'm going to go ahead and press Return to accept the transform. And again, I need to hide the other illustrations that came along with that file. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my Smart Object layer. And you know it's a Smart Object layer, incidentally, because it now carries a special badge. So I'm going to zoom in really far so you can see that badge. It's the little, at the bottom right of the layer thumbnail, it looks like a little piece of paper with an upturned corner at the bottom right of the thumbnail. That's the Smart Object badge, so that lets you know that Photoshop did indeed bring it in as a Smart Object. So now we're just going to slap on a layer mask by clicking the little circle within a square icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. We've still got our brush tools active over in the Tools panel. I've still got black as my foreground color chip, and in the realm of the layer mask, black conceals and white reveals. So a rhyme us creatives have come up with to memorize what color to paint with when, and I always have to say it in my head. I always have to think about what I'm doing. Am I hiding? Am I showing? And I always like to think of layer masks as digital masking tape, because just like you'd use the digital masking tape on your baseboards before you paint the walls, you've got digital masking tape in Photoshop. So now we've spiced up our picture. That's a lot of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and close that one again, and we will just keep on going with the vector fun. Now, sometimes you may already have Illustrator open. So let's say we want to add a cute embellishment to this guitar photo, and maybe I've already got the file open in Illustrator. Let's say I want to add this dove to the guitar and make kind of a modern-day Woodstock looking poster. Well, you don't have to go through the File Place procedure in Photoshop. You can simply select the item in Illustrator, and I've just pressed Command-A to select all or Control-A on a PC, or of course you can use the direct selection arrow and just click and drag and draw a bounding box around your art in Illustrator, and simply copy it to your pasteboard by pressing Command-C or Control-C on a PC. I'm going to switch back to Photoshop, and I just simply paste. So I'm going to press Command-V as in Victor, or Control-V as in Victor on a PC, and Photoshop's going to ask you, well, how would you like to paste this item? Would you like it to be a Smart Object, pixels, path, or a shape layer? Well, if you want to experiment with resizing it and have Photoshop remember that it is indeed a vector, you want to choose Smart Object. So go ahead and press OK. And the item will come in again with the bounding box, which lets you resize it. And so we're just going to scoot this little bird up here just a little bit and press Return. So that's another way that you can import a vector as a Smart Object into an already open Photoshop document. And of course, this kind of thing isn't just for, making, cute little artsy things or dressing up photos. It can also be very good therapy for breakups, family reunions, divorces, you wouldn't believe. So let me illustrate that point to you. We're going to go ahead and open up this handsome man, also from Istockphoto. And I've already got some art open in Illustrator. So I'm going to come over here. And another thing that I love about iStock is that the illustrations have so much going on in them, some of them, that I may not care about, you know, the cake and the all this other stuff going on in this photo. I just want the bunny ears. So I'm going to go up and grab my direct selection tool, and I'm going to click on the vector art that I want. And depending upon how the artist has created the vector art, you may have to go up in Illustrator's Object menu and choose Ungroup. But this artwork wasn't locked together, it wasn't grouped together, so I can indeed select different portions of it without selecting the whole thing. But just know that if you do open up a vector and you try to click, let's say, one piece of art inside of it, and it doesn't let you, just hop up to the Object menu and see if Ungroup is active, so you can choose that. So I've got the bunny ears selected. I'm going to press Command-C, Control-C to copy to my clipboard, pop back over to Photoshop, and again we're going to paste, Command-V or Control-V. And yes, Photoshop, I would like to paste it as a smart object. So here's our bunny ears. So I'm going to click within the bounding box to move the ears on top of his unsuspecting head. And of course I'm going to make them a little bit bigger, and I'm going to hover my mouse just beyond the corner of the bounding box to get my curved arrow and press return when I'm finished, and retribution has been satisfied. Lots of fun to be had with vectors and photos. Okay, moving on. The next thing I want to show you how to do is use one of those wonderfully ornamental vectors as a photo frame. So this is what we're going to create right here. So I'm going to close this one, and we'll start over, and I'll show you how I made it. So I'm going to start with this photo of these happy singing karaoke ladies, and I'm going to bring in one of these fabulous grunge frames that I found over on iStock. And just a quick little tip for you, if I can find my iStock window. There it is. I find all kinds of fantastic frame-worthy pieces of art by searching for grunge frame. So I just did a search for grunge and frame over on iStock. And as you know, if the piece of art is black, it's perfect for a layer mask. So just look at all these possibilities. And you know, all this ornamental stuff, embellishments and curvy lines and all that frilly stuff is all the rage right now. So if you can't create it yourself, or you don't have the time, you know, these stock art companies are a fabulous resource for you to have. So this is another one that would work really well. So I just wanted to show you guys a few of the possibilities over here for frames for your photos. So let me go back to Photoshop, and we're going to bring in this really neat frame. So again, since I've got a Photoshop document open and I want to place the frame inside the document, so I'm going to choose File, Place, and we're going to navigate to where the EPS or the AI file lives. And this one lives right here, Ornamental Vector Frame. And I'm going to click on the EPS file and click Place. And once again, it comes in with the resizing handles, and I'm going to use my Command-0 or Control-0 trick to make Photoshop resize the window so I can actually see the darn resizing handles. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, move it around just a bit, and press Return or Enter on a PC when I'm satisfied with it. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to load that illustration as a selection. In other words, we want marching ants running all the way around it so we can use it as a layer mask on our photo. So what I'm going to do is Command-click the layer thumbnail or Control-click it on a PC, and we get marching ants. Now in Photoshop, I think the first create
Okay, we did lose audio for real there. I don't know if Lisa's still talking, but yeah, the sound cut out. So, Lesa, let me see what I can do about that. Hold on just a moment, and I'm going to test something. I'm afraid we may have. Can you hear me, everyone? Okay, you can hear me.
We can hear.
Oh, great. Thanks. I think Lesa has been disconnected, so let's see if she can dial back in. Yeah, she seems to be gone, or she's been having some connection problems today, so we'll get her to dial right back in, and maybe I can have a chance to ask her some of these questions before she jumps back in. You're hearing echoing. A lot of times you'll hear echoing if you have the mic on your computer turned on. So, Lesa? Hello, Lesa? I don't see her dialed in yet. Let me, I don't think she knows. Hold on just a moment. I have to find a way to get her attention. Maybe I will just,
Well, now, that was fun.
Hey, are you back, Tess? Did you realize that we lost your sound?
No, I didn't hear a
Okay,
single
yeah.
thing. It was only the meeting just disconnected itself.
Oh, okay. Well, you're back now, and we can hear you again. And
Yay!
everything's okay. There were a couple. Never mind about the questions. But one I did want to ask about vector masks. Are they available in Photoshop Elements too?
No.
No. And
No,
what
I don't
about
think
GIMP?
you can.
There have been some.
What about what now?
GIMP, the open source photo editing program.
I honestly don't know, Catherine. I honestly
don't know either. So, okay, carry on.
Okay. Well, why don't I start over with this one because I'm not sure where the audio dropped. Okay, this technique right here. Okay. It cut out right before she used the mask. Okay, cool. So we're going to start over. I'm going to not save that one, and we're going to pop back over here, and we're going to start with our singing ladies again, and we're going to bring in the vector as a smart object. Since we want to import it into the document that we already have open, we're going to choose File, Place, and now we're going to navigate to where the EPS or the AI file is, and that little sucker is right there, and we're going to click Place. And again, Photoshop brings it in with the bounding box, so we're going to use our Command 0 or Control 0 rather tip to resize the window so we can actually see the handles of the resizing box. And I'm pressing and holding Shift Option or Shift Alt on a PC to resize all four sides at the same time and restrict the aspect ratio of the original. So now what we want to do is we want to load the vector as a selection, and that's easily done by pressing Command or Control as you click the layer thumbnail. And you'll see the marching ants go all the way around it. And as soon as you see the marching ants, you can go ahead and toggle the visibility off on the smart object because we won't need it again unless you want to resize the frame. So now we need to add a layer mask to our photo here. And, of course, Photoshop will squawk quite loudly if you try to add a layer mask to a locked background layer. So let's go ahead and give that a double click to unlock it. Now we can add our layer mask. So just go ahead and click the circle within a square at the bottom of your layers panel, and Photoshop immediately hides the edges of the photo according to the shape of the selection, which was our fabulous vector. So now you might add a nice new color background at the bottom of your layer stack, but lest you be tempted to just add a plain old layer, drag it to the bottom of your layers panel, and then fill it with color, I have a better tip for you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this extra layer. What we want to do is we want to add an adjustment layer. And you can create an adjustment layer by clicking the little half black, half white circle at the bottom of your layers panel. And we want to choose the first one, which is called solid color. Okay. And you can pick any color you want. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it set to, actually I'll just do white right here, and press OK. And then I'm going to drag the adjustment layer down below the photo. Using an adjustment layer to fill a solid layer with color is more efficient. It will not bloat the size of your Photoshop document. You know, every time you add another layer filled with pixels, it increases the file size of your document. Also, if we were to ever change the canvas size of this image, you would have to keep, if we made it bigger, you'd have to keep refilling that layer with color. Well, if you change the canvas size and you've got a solid fill adjustment layer, it changes size with you. So that's another little tip for you. So now we might double-click the fill adjustment layer here to experiment with the color. So double-click the layer thumbnail, and if you mouse away from the color picker, you'll notice that your cursor becomes an eyedropper. And anytime I've zapped the background of an image, or if I've created a frame like this, I like to create a new background, but instead of remembering all the color theory I had in design school years ago, I like to just snatch a color from the image, because if the color already lives in the image, it's going to match. So if you mouse away from the color picker, your cursor will turn into an eyedropper so you can snatch a color from anywhere. Press OK to close it. And then the last thing I would do is tack on the obligatory drop shadow to your vector layer, or to your mask layer rather, so you can see all the wonderful shapes and twists of this vector. So I'm going to click the little effects button at the bottom of the layers panel and choose drop shadow. And immediately the layer style dialog is going to pop open, and instead of using this angle slider and degree field, I'm just going to mouse over to my image and drag the drop shadow around. A lot of people don't realize you can do that. So to place your drop shadow, just mouse over to your image and drag it into place. Also, new in Photoshop CS5 is the ability to save your favorite layer style settings as a default. So let's say we reduce the opacity of this shadow to maybe 40%, and you want all of your shadows to be 40%, then you can just click Make Default, and that's a new button in CS5 only. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK, and we're going to close this image, and we're going to work on another one. So I'm going to pop back over to Bridge, go back into our file, and this time I want to show you how to easily use a vector to swap out a white background, and you will not believe how fast this trick is. So we're going to go ahead and double-click our dude here, our disco dude, open him up in Photoshop, and then I'm going to bring in my vector once again. So I'm going to choose File, Place, navigate to where the vector lives, vector background swap, navigate to the EPS or the AI file, click Place. And if you get this Place PDF dialog box, go ahead and click OK. So here's our vector. Once again, I can't see the resizing handle, so I'm going to press Command-0, Control-0 on a PC. Hold down Shift and Option as I resize it. And I'm going to move the disco ball so it's over here at the top right corner. There we go. So now, instead of creating some kind of selection around our disco dude so that you can see the background behind him, I'm going to simply make this background swap by changing blend modes. And the blend modes you can access up here at the top of your layers panel, this little pop-up menu that should be set to normal. If you give it a click, you can choose anything in this top category. You can see the little dividing lines. It looks like they're divvied up into some kind of organization. If you choose anything in the darken category, Photoshop looks at the color on one layer, looks at the color on the other layer, and it keeps only the darkest colors, which means white will vanish because anything is darker than white. So if we choose one of these blend modes, and one of them will work better than the other depending upon the colors that are in your image, then white drops right out because anything is darker than white. So for this technique, actually darker color works the best. So as soon as I choose that, you'll see, let me zoom in by pressing Command plus or Control plus on a PC, you can see that the background is just seamless beyond our disco dude. Now there are a couple of places where the background was darker than something on his body, like for example right here, some of the background is bleeding through on his collar and a little bit on his hand, but that's easily fixable. All you have to do is add a layer mask by clicking the little circle within a square icon at the bottom of the layers panel. Again, painting with a paintbrush with your foreground color chip set to black, you can simply hide those areas of your new background, and it's just a really fast way to swap a white background for anything that's not white. So I'm just going to make a couple little touch-ups here. And the great thing about using a layer mask for this is if you mess up like I did and you hide too much, then you can press the X key to reveal. So you're painting with white and you can just reveal that area again. So layer masks are really handy. So he looks a lot happier there on that new disco background. So I'm going to go ahead and press Command W or Control W to close the window, D to don't save, and we're going to keep on rocking along here. I want to show you one other idea for creating collages with vectors with nary a selection like we just did. So we're going to create this look right here, and we're going to start with the photo of this cute little kid. So we're going to go ahead and pop him open in Photoshop. And I'm actually going to increase the size of my canvas so I have some space to the left side of the photo. So I'm going to double-click the background layer first. And then I'm going to grab the crop tool by pressing C, and I'm going to simply draw a box around the image, and I'm going to extend the left and right middle handle so that I've got a larger canvas area to work with. And then I'm going to go ahead and press V to use the Move tool and slide this little boy over to the right. Now I'm ready to begin placing my vectors. So I'm going to go back up to the File menu, choose Place, navigate to where my vectors live, Grunge Collage. Here's one, Musical Notes, the EPS file, so go ahead and click Place. Once again, we've got our resizing handles, Command-0, Control-0, then Shift-Alt or Shift-Option on a Mac to resize it proportionally from all four corners at once. Go ahead and press Return to let Photoshop know that we're finished. And I press Command-0 again to come back up to actual size. So now we've got music notes coming out of the guitar, so let's add another cool background. So we can choose File, Place, navigate to the Blu-rays EPS, bring that puppy in. Photoshop's going to think about it a little bit. And again, we need to use our Command-0, Control-0, Fit to Screen trick to resize the vector so that it actually fits. Press Return when you're finished. I'll go ahead and press Command-0, Control-0 to come back to regular size again. And Photoshop's going to think about this for a moment. There we go. So now the only problem is that we can't see our cute little kid down here at the bottom of our layer stack. Well, with the blend mode trick you just learned, all you have to do is select one of these layers and use the blend mode pop-up menu to choose anything in that darker color category, because remember we're trying to drop out the white background and anything is darker than white, so that's kind of your clue to remember which one to pick. In this situation, I'm going to choose a linear burn, and again, a nice glass of wine, Friday night, go through all of these blend modes. That is seriously some high entertainment. So I've changed this guy to linear burn. I'm going to go ahead and click on our musical notes and change that to linear burn as well. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a threshold adjustment on the little boy's picture to make him as high contrast as he can be. And you can't get more high contrast than black and white. So the easiest non-destructive way to do that is to add a threshold adjustment layer. And you can do that by clicking the little half black, half white circle at the bottom of your layers panel and choosing threshold. And now we've got this fabulous grungy collage going on. And of course you can lower the opacity on any of the other vector layers if they're just too overpowering. But this is yet another idea of how to incorporate vectors into a collage. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that image. And I'm going to show you one more thing, maybe two more things. Another great way to utilize vectors, and this time we're going to use the vector shape tools in Photoshop, is to utilize them for masking. And if you start out with a smart object, you can actually replace the contents of that smart object. So, for example, let's say you work for a magazine, or you are the webmaster of a very large website, and you've got a big staff page, or you've got headshots for columnists for your magazine, or you're creating a school annual or whatever. You've got a slew of headshots that need to have the same kind of edge effect and the same kind of attributes applied to them. Well, you can easily do that using vector shapes and smart objects. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by swapping this photo, turning it into a smart object rather, because I always forget to open up the photos as a smart object. So if you do that, if you're like me, don't panic. You can quickly convert any photo into a smart object quickly by hopping up to the filter menu and just saying convert for smart filters, because it's the same thing, convert for smart object. Also, that is in the layer panel, you can choose a smart object, convert to smart object. So this is going to make our photo a smart object, which is going to make that layer swappable, so we can replace the content in that layer for something else, which will be another headshot. So let's go ahead and do all the attributes to this photo that we want to. I'm going to go ahead and hop over to my vector tools over here in the tools panel. Okay, and I want to add rounded edges to this headshot. Okay, that's going to be my effect, my template, if you will. So I'm going to grab the rounded rectangle tool. And Photoshop's vector tools can be used in one of three modes. And you can see the modes at the very top of your screen in the options bar, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see them. The first mode that you have here to the left is shape layer mode. So if you draw with any of the shape tools, you're going to create another layer called a shape layer. The next button to the right is called path mode. So if you draw with the vector tools, or the shape tools rather, in this mode, it's going to create a path. And we learned at the very top of the session that points and paths are what comprise vectors. They're not made of pixels, they're made of points and paths. And because of that, they're infinitely resizable with no quality loss. So we're going to go ahead and choose path. The other drawing mode to the right simply will fill the shape with pixels, which is not what we want. So we want to be in path mode. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out, and I'm going to mouse over to my image, and you get a crosshair. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my radius is set to about 50 pixels, because that's going to give me, it's going to give me nice rounded edges. And that was a good example that you always need to remember to type in the unit of measurement in any of these fields. PX for pixels, IN for inches. So now that I've got my rounded corner radius set, I'm going to go ahead and click and drag diagonally on my photo, and you can see the nice little rounded corners here. So I'm going to release my mouse button, and now I want to add a vector mask, because Photoshop sees this path right here, this gray outline, and if you command click or control click the layer mask icon at the bottom of your layers panel, you will create a vector mask instead of a pixel-based mask. And what that does for you is that allows you to resize the mask infinitely without losing quality, as well as if you have Photoshop CS4 or CS5, you can feather the mask on the fly by opening the Masks panel. And you'll see you've got a little feather slider right here. So if you want to experiment with your headshots for your columnists, you know, in your magazine or your staff page on your website or what have you, newspaper, you can experiment with, do I like the edges soft? Do I like them hard? You know, or maybe you need to submit it to the client or the art director, and this allows you to do this feathering on the fly non-destructively. Okay, instead of start creating a selection, feathering it, and adding the mask, you've done it all in one fell swoop with the path created by the vector shape tool, and you can undo that feather anytime you want. Now let's go ahead and add another fun effect. Let's say that all of the headshots for your columnists need to be sepia tone or black and white. Well, that's easily done by go ahead and clicking the half black, half white circle at the bottom of the layers panel, and we're going to choose a black and white adjustment layer. So go ahead and choose black and white, and this is one of the easiest, most flexible ways to create a grayscale from a color image. And you can tweak the individual sliders here to, tweak the individual sliders to produce more contrast. in your image. Okay, so let's say the contrast is just fine, and perhaps we want to add a color tint. So go ahead and click the tint checkbox at the top of the adjustments panel. And if you want to change the color of that tint, you can. Photoshop assumes you want to add a brown tint, otherwise known as sepia, because it's the most popular. But you can click the little tint color swatch, and it'll pop open the color picker. I'm going to click cancel because I want it to stay brown. Now, let's say that you are ready. This is your template now. This is all set. So any new columnists come on board or any new employees at your company, if they need the same treatment, since you have used a smart object here, and a smart object is simply a container, and you can stick all kinds of files in it. When you use a smart object, as we've been doing this whole session with vectors, Photoshop memorizes everything about the original file. What program created it? Is it a vector? Is it a RAW? Is it a JPEG? And different, you can do different things with those different file types. Photoshop also memorizes where the file lived, what its original dimensions were, and so on and so forth. So we started out using smart objects as a way to make Photoshop remember that we're utilizing a vector, which means we can resize it infinitely without losing quality. But in this situation, we've used a smart object because we want to replace the contents on this layer right here. We're going to swap out our superhero picture for another one. But first I want to go ahead and save my document as my template because as new employees come on or new columnists, I need to be able to apply the same effect to them. So go ahead and choose File, Save As, and I'm just going to stick this puppy on my desktop and I'm going to say Headshot Template. And that way, if you ever need to go back to it, you've got it. And it's a little bit less frustrating using Smart Object templates than Actions because Actions can be so finicky. So let's go ahead and swap out our content. What you want to do is you want to right-click or control-click to the right of your Smart Object layer. And you know it's a Smart Object because it's got that special little badge at the bottom right corner of the thumbnail. So go ahead and control-click or right-click beyond the layer's name, over here to the far right, and you're going to get a special little pop-up menu. And one of the options is Replace Contents. So we're going to go ahead and give that a click, and we're going to navigate to where the new file lives. And I'm going to go back to my folder here. So here's my second headshot that I want to apply all the same attributes to. Press Enter or Return, and there it is. So that little technique was using the vector shape tools, the rounded rectangle tool, to create rounded edges. And because we turned the photo, the original photo, into a smart object, we gained the ability to swap out the contents of that smart object. And of course we used the path created by our rounded rectangle tool as a vector mask, which also means that we can feather it on the fly. So let's say you've saved this document and your art director says, yeah, well, the rounded edges are great, but, I really want to see them feathered. So you pop this baby open, you click once to select your vector mask, and you open the Masks panel, and it should be open over here on the right-hand side, but if you don't see it, you can choose Window Masks to open it, and then you can just grab the feather slider and experiment with what the feather looks like. Now this thin gray line right here will not print. That's simply showing you the outline of the path. And to get rid of it, all you need to do is click on any other layer and it'll temporarily disappear. So let me show you one more technique on that, one more little spin, and that is the Oh So Romantic Soft Oval Vignette. So I'm going to open up these two images, and I'm going to open them up in the same document so I can apply a elliptical vector mask to make it look like the guitar player is faded into the crowd. But let's say I'm a bit lazy. I don't want to open these things up individually and then copy and paste or drag from my layers panel to combine them into one document. Let me show you a trick for that. If you have Photoshop Extended, CS4 or CS5, you can make it open multiple images within the same document all by itself. What you want to do is choose File. Excuse me. You want to choose File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. And this is quite the time saver if you do a lot of collage work, or combining images rather. So now we're going to click Browse to tell Photoshop where these images live. I'm going to go to the appropriate folder, and I'm going to click one and shift-click the other. and click Open. And Photoshop is going to ask me all kinds of things. Would you like to automatically align them? No thanks. Do you want to combine them into a single smart object after loading them? No, I just want you to open them all on their own layers. Click OK, and Photoshop does so. So that's a quick way to open multiple images on separate layers in one document. Now I'm going to drag my crowd layer below my guitar player. I'm going to trot over to the Tools menu. This time I'm going to select my Ellipse Tool. Now this technique is typically done by using the elliptical marquee, and then you feather it, and then you add a layer mask. Well, this is a little bit of an update on that technique. We're going to choose the Ellipse Tool. We're going to trot it to the options bar and make sure that we're in Path mode. That's the second button. And then we're going to click and drag diagonally to draw our circle. And incidentally, anytime you're drawing either a marquee selection or a path like this with the shape tools, you can press and hold the space tool, or the space bar rather, to move the shape around while you're drawing it, which is handy. So I'm going to say that's about good right there. I'm going to release all my keys. And again, I'm going to add a vector mask. And you can do that by command clicking or control clicking the circle within a square icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. Or if you've got CS4 or CS5, you can open the mask panel and just click the tiny little pen nub icon at the top right of that panel, and that will also add a vector mask. And then as you learned in the previous technique, if you decide to feather that puppy on the fly, well, you can certainly do that too. And then, of course, to get rid of that or to hide that path outline, that thin gray line that you see, you can click any other layer. And just to finish this composition off, I'll grab the crop tool by pressing C, and I'll just go ahead and crop out that extra space on the side. So as you can see, using vectors in Photoshop, bringing them in as smart objects can really spice up your photos, as well as using the vector shape tools for masking with vector mask can also be quite powerful. So I think we're going to take some questions now because we're almost out of time.
Hey, Lesa, thanks. Oops, let me mute my computer there. Okay. Hey, Lesa, thanks for the outstanding presentation. I knew it would be good, but you really, really know your stuff. Very impressive.
Well, thank you.
And people have been saying so the whole time. So we do have some questions, and some of them go back to the very beginning, so just bear with me, and I'll try to give you some context. At the very beginning, when you were working with adding the musical notes to the saxophone player, Jason was asking what you were doing. How is it different when you were creating the vector mask? How is that different than just using layers?
Well, when we brought in the musical notes for this image right here, using a vector, we didn't use a vector mask on this one. We used a regular old layer mask. The beauty of using the vector with the musical notes right here is that we get to experiment with size. Let's say, we don't know what size we want those musical notes to be until we get them into our composition. Well, if you've brought in a vector as a smart object, you can experiment with size without ever have to worry that your artwork is going to be pixelated, because you can resize a vector infinitely without losing quality. So that's why we used the vector for the musical notes, was to experiment with size. We did not use a vector mask. We used a regular old layer mask to hide the other musical notes that we didn't want.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Now, there were a lot of questions about what a smart object is. And can you just give us in a few words what it is?
Sure. A smart object is basically a container. Think of it as a Tupperware bowl in your refrigerator. You can put most anything you want in it, but it stays within that Tupperware bowl, right? So when you get through with the contents of the Tupperware bowl, you can replace the contents with something else. Correct?
Right.
If my asparagus has gone bad, I can put in, whatever last night's leftovers were. Same Tupperware bowl, same container, different content, and swappable content. Also, anything you put into a smart object forces Photoshop to memorize everything about it, what kind of file it was, the program that created it, its original dimensions, and so on and so forth. Well, when you import a vector as a smart object, Photoshop memorizes that it's a vector, and therefore that vector retains all of its wonderful vectorness, which is the ability to resize it infinitely without ever losing quality.
Well, you make this seem so easy. I can't wait to play around with it. Now, unfortunately, I just have Photoshop Elements, and I know that a few other people do. And you said that a lot of this wasn't doable in Photoshop Elements, but are there some things you demonstrated that are? Probably not.
I'd have to go back and check because we don't have vector masks in Elements, and we don't have smart objects in Elements.
Okay.
So, but if you brought in a vector, you could open a vector in Elements. It would just need to be the right size. You wouldn't have the ability to resize it. You'd need to bring it in at the exact size you want to use it, or make it smaller. In other words, you could never make it bigger in Elements because Elements, as soon as it comes into Elements, Elements has forgotten that it's a vector, okay? So then it behaves just like any other JPEG, but you can still do the same things I did, but you would not retain the ability to resize that vector without losing quality.
Okay, all right. So way back near the beginning, Alberto asked, is there a quick way to modify brush hardness? You had a lot of shortcuts in there.
Oh, yeah. In CS5, you can modify brush hardness with the same keyboard shortcut you can for size. And let me select my brush tool. And I think it is, let me just double-click that so I can edit it. Gosh, all these keyboard shortcuts. I'm trying to remember which one it is. It's convoluted. It's like 3 or 4 keys that you hold down. Oh, that's the color picker. I'd have to look it up. But there is a way. I want to say it's Shift-Command-Option, I think, and you drag left and right to change size, but you can also drag up and down to change hardness. I just can't remember which 3 keys it is.
Okay, great. And let me see what else. So I just want to interrupt. We're getting a lot of questions about the recording. We will have the recording available within a day or so in a couple ways that you can view it. One will be as an Adobe Connect archive meeting, so you can watch it just like this experience, the chat room and everything else. The links are live, etc. So it's sort of recreates this experience, except it's not a live event. And then we'll also have it as a high-resolution movie on our YouTube channel. And you'll find that embedded on our webcast page, too, which is OReilly.com/webcast. So now back to Photoshop. We have a couple minutes. So John was asking if there are good royalty-free sources for quality vector images that people can test if they lack drawing skills.
Absolutely. Well, in my opinion, Istockphoto is the best one. It was one of the first affordable stock companies, in the world back in around 2002-ish, I believe. But they have a slew of vectors, and they're so affordable. You can get vectors from anywhere from 2 credits, which is roughly about $1. So anywhere between, $2 and $20 over at Istockphoto, you can grab a wonderful set of vectors. And this is the iStock site right here. You can choose which database to search. So when I'm hunting for vectors, I click only on the illustration box, and then I can type in whatever I want, let's say, decorative background, and it's only going to give me the results from the vector database, from the illustrations. And there are just oodles and gobs of them. I mean, bazillions. So Istockphoto is my go-to resource for vectors.
Okay, that looks like a lot of fun too. Let me see. So Alberto also asked, what's new in Photoshop CS5 that's relevant to this presentation? And it may not be, because you did call it combining photos and vectors in Photoshop, and I added the CS5 to the title, which was probably a mistake.
Yeah, I didn't do anything that was CS5 specific. I believe the only thing that we talked about in CS5 was, honestly can't even remember now, Catherine. I don't think anything I did was specific to CS5.
Okay, well, how many?
A lot of it was specific to CS4.
And what if you have CS3? Are you still good?
Yeah. As long as you've got smart objects, you're good.
Okay, good. Just wanted to check. And then Alberto also had another good question. Is there a Photoshop keyboard shortcut cheat sheet anywhere?
Yes, you can actually download one from the Photoshop CS4 or CS5 missing manual. It's part of the missing CD contents.
Oh, that's cool. All right. And
yeah.
We put that link in the chat room a few places. So
yeah.
I think those are all the questions that we have. There was one that I'm not sure I can remember the context for. It was Patty asked it when you were working on the sepia image of the gentleman. She said, could you just have added a new layer with a new photo and applied the smart object? But that's all I.
Well, you could, but that would be more steps. So, just swapping the contents of that one layer when you get it just right is more efficient. So you'll save, 2 or 3 or 4 clicks. You could, in Photoshop you can do anything 100 different ways, but now we're getting some really powerful tools in Photoshop with each subsequent version that allow us to be more efficient in our techniques. And for example, the soft oval vignette that we created with the Ellipse Tool in path mode is much more efficient than using the elliptical marquee and feathering it, adding a mask. So, you're fine-tuning, a 6-step technique down into 3 or 4 steps. So you certainly could do it that way, but using smart objects is more efficient.
Okay, good. That's good to know. And then Marcy, our friend Marcy, is asking, where will you be making some live appearances?
Oh, what a great question. Well, I'm going to be at Photoshop World in September. I've got a Combining Photos and Vectors class there, as well as the Beginning Photoshop pre-conference that happens the day before Photoshop World starts. And I'm also going to be at the wonderful Mac Computer Expo in Petaluma, California. It's called MCE Petaluma, I believe. Is that how you say it? Petaluma?
Yeah, it's in our backyard.
Yeah, so you can go to ncmug.org to find out more about that. But perhaps easier is just go to my author page on O'Reilly.com, and I've got all of my upcoming events listed there.
That's great. That's great. And people are asking about the discount codes, et cetera. The CD, there's not really a CD with an ebook as a download. It's the missing CD from the book, so it's content you download that goes along with the book. It's on her book site, on her page. And the code that we gave you, which is forecast, numeral 4, CAST, is actually good for 40% off your print book purchase. It's not just limited to leases. So if you want to get 2 or 3 or different books, that will give you 40% off your purchase. Or if you're buying ebooks, 50% off those. So it's a great deal. In fact, one of the best deals you can get. So.
Oh, definitely. And just so everybody knows, that's a nearly 840-page book, and there are 5 additional appendices online that you download.
Yeah, it's
so
really awesome.
It's big.
So one last thing, Lesa, this was really, really great, and I can't tell you enough. I enjoyed it so much, and I do a lot of these. So I did want to say that we do have a post-event survey. We really appreciate some feedback in that. I'm putting that link in the chat room right now, if I can copy it. There it is. You'll also get an email from us if you registered in about 12 hours that will have that link. We really appreciate feedback. It helps us know what to do in the future and what we did right and what we did wrong. So if you can take the time to do that, you don't have to do it, Lesa. And we randomly select 3 people to get the free ebook of their choice. So you have a chance to do that too if you take it. And that's about it. So I just want to thank you and thank everyone who participated. There was a lot of good knowledge shared in the chat room too.
Great. Well, it was a ton of fun, and I hope y'all all take advantage of the 5 free images and the 20% discount from iStock and the fabulous 40% discount that O'Reilly is offering, as well as the sample issue of Design Tools Monthly. And you can just hop over to my site, graphicreporter.com, and click on the link on the right-hand side to get your free sample issue. I just love giving away free stuff.
It's great. Okay. Well, thanks so much. I hope we can have you back again in the future.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Guys, I'm going to close the meeting out, count down to 10, and close it out. So thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.